Just probably wait for some people to get on here. I'm gonna try a couple of things. Yep. Let's see if I can do that. Share screen. Yes, I can. Okay. So, hey everybody, gonna go ahead and start the show. Hope everybody's had a good evening. Let me check something real quick. There we go. See, this is why live is so interesting to me because the older I get, the less savvy I am technically. So we're gonna get right into it. I had episode uh, 22. This will now be episode 22, but I had a episode called "The Human Experience," and that was supposed to be part one, um, where I kind of talked about just things as humans that we go through, our commonalities and whatnot. If you haven't seen it, give it a check out on my page. It'll be under Hunter7977 on YouTube, and it's called Conversations with Samuel. So I am Samuel. Welcome to Conversations. This is my first live stream. I'm not expecting a lot of people to come on. I'm a new creator, so I am starting out. I do have many videos here. So it's all a work in progress. Everybody's got to start somewhere. So I am starting here. So this is my first live. Everybody, welcome. So uh, if you have seen the title of this video, it's called "A Nation Divided." Um, I want to open the discussion to kind of get into stuff a little bit outside of politics that's causing us to be divided, because that's so easy for us to discuss at this point. I mean, we have different sides of things when it comes to politics, but I think that the root of where all that came from happened years ago. you know um First of all, everybody's really got to understand is it really is true that a house divided amongst itself cannot stand. I believe Abraham Lincoln said that. And so I have watched, and I don't really speak on, current events as far as news and things like that. I might have some entertainment things I might talk about, especially on TikTok. I might bring up some things. But for the most part, I don't really have anything that um, in particular stands out as far as political views, because I kind of see things two different ways. I mean, I don't see myself on the left for sure, and I don't see myself on the right for sure. But I would be more of what I call a centrist, and I hate even having labels because I think labels are the things that causes all this division. So, what do you call someone who sees things differently and who critically thinks? Um, I just remember a time where, and I bring this up because a lot of people, I brought this up on Facebook, and I said, in your honest opinion, why is the nation so divided? And I heard, or well, I read rather, varying thoughts, posts. Racism was one, propaganda, the media, and then someone said prejudice. And so I thought a little bit deeper about the one when it says prejudice, because a lot of people, when they say prejudice, we're talking about racism, and prejudging, and stuff like that. But when we say prejudging, we look at it as we are prejudging, a race all the time, but you can prejudge situations, you can prejudge opinions, you can prejudge something that somebody's going through. You can have all these things happen. And so prejudice was a bit of a deep one because that crosses all boundaries. Like the one thing that I know stands out for me is having grown up as a Xennial. If you don't know what a Xennial is, that is a person before the age of 50 that has seen 6 decades. Um, so there are people like me who have seen bunch of different changes, paradigm shifts in life, life before the internet, life before cell phones, life before social media. And so then everything was face to face, and you had to be a straight shooter with everyone you spoke to. You didn't get to hide behind a keyboard, you didn't get to hide behind an app. You had to actually deal with the things that you said to people. You were confronted, and so it made for a lot of honesty and a lot of realness that doesn't exist today. And so to me, that's one of the bigger things that has caused the nation to be divided. It's not, politics is a byproduct of that. Racism is a byproduct of that, and that really, people look at it and see that it's reared its head. And so then I kind of even question that, because then it's like, um I don't think people are more racist. I think that just everybody has a platform now, so to speak. Everybody has a platform, and all these people can hide behind things. And it's usually 9 times out of 10, these people don't have profile pictures. Um, they're very inaccessible type things. And because these people, whether they're white or black or Hispanic or Asian, they all know what they're doing in that regard. And so there's racism across the board. And so when you combine that with social media, you're bound to get the reactions and the things that are happening today. And like I said, if you know my age and you come from where I come from, you know that there was a time where you weren't allowed to get away with saying things about people without some sort of consequence befalling you. And so it just really befuddles my mind at how bold and how daring people are. I had posted a video about the pale blue dot. I had this really inspirational thought, um, about the planet, and I forget what I was looking at, but it just got me to really thinking about how fortunate we are. It really hit me. And so I decided to do a video about, everything that we have known throughout history, everything that we are, it all exists in this pale blue dot that floats in the middle of space. And so one of the comments that popped up was, I hope nobody believes this BS and nonsense. And I was just kind of like, what kind of black hearted person would take something like that and find some sort of way to do it? And then it goes into this whole thing where you go, oh, I'm being trolled, And then the fact that people have time for that is just amazing to me. And so and I mean that in the most sarcastic way possible. Um, and so it goes into, like I said, social media, the fact that everybody's allowed to have a voice, and not all those voices are for good. Everyone's allowed to say what they want. Everyone, you know, engages. And so what you're hearing is what people really think, because a lot of times, yes, you might have some people that are trolling, but there's a majority of people that are just strictly speaking their mind, and this is the best avenue for it. They have multiple accounts, and then they find like-minded people like them, and they form groups. And this is on all sides. The level of vitriol goes both ways, two, three, four, five ways. I won't even say both ways, but we pretty much all engage in it. You know, I mean, look at even content, the content that makes it and the content that doesn't. The stuff that I'm talking about, nobody wants to hear. That's why I have no views anywhere right now doing a live. I have 101 subscribers. I'm grateful for every one of those subscribers, but nobody wants to hear positive talk. Nobody wants to have an actual conversation or discourse. That's why this is empty right now. But a person like me is never going to give up on what I'm trying to do. There's a message to be shared. There are things to be learned, and I have those things to share, and I have those things to teach. And I think that I can affect the world in a better way. You know, I'm pushing 50 and I'm a late bloomer. And so this is my goal. This is what I'm going for. So I'm going to keep doing it regardless. But as I go along this path and look at this, and look at the lack of engagement, and then I look at the people that get engagement, I'm sorry I can't do skits like Drewski. I'm sorry that I'm not out here blowing things up or roasting people or anything like that. I'm just having a great conversation, sharing my life experiences and things like that. And I don't believe in violence. I don't believe in the things that are going on. And I just get so sick and tired of seeing people just being so rotten and so mean to each other. I mean, even on the street, even when people are driving, it's like you'll cut somebody off to get to McDonald's and you almost tear the front end off of somebody's car. And then that person in that car, you don't know, that might be their first car. Or that might be their only means of transportation, their only means of making money. And because you want to get to Chick-fil-A first, you tear the front end off of their car. It's things like that. You know, it's simple holding the door open for somebody. There is such a lack of common courtesy and respect for other people that it's almost sickening. Like it's almost hard to go out in public anymore because it's just like people just don't care. And so I try to think about where that comes from, and I try to think about that logically. I have long taken my feelings out of things like this, but simply because if you allow your feelings to get involved in this, they're just going to get beat up and beat up and beat up until you become numb. And then you end up doing what I call is living long enough to see yourself become the villain. You end up just in a whole nother place if you just engage in all this stuff. And so it's so hard to stay away from, though. And so um, like I said, these are things that are dividing us, and then there's the propaganda. There's the things that are fed into social media. I mean, clickbait, articles where the title tells the whole story, you know, 30-second videos that give an update on something where the whole context is completely missed. It's like my stuff that I created. I did a video and it was about 6 minutes on overcoming a terrible childhood. And the recommendation, and this doesn't come from, people or whatever. Uh, the recommendation on the video was that it was too long and to keep it under a minute because that is the length of time people have an attention span. That's crazy because I'm the type of person that I can't get everything out in 1 minute. I cannot convey really what it is I want to say in 1 minute. Like I did a video about, um, you know, 10 hood movies of all time. And I've seen people do it and they do it in a matter of like a minute or two. And there was so much nuance to each of these movies, and I put so much thought into it that the video ended up like 9.5 minutes. And I just, it's just hard to adjust to when you have my type of thought process and way of expressing myself. You look at all of this and you just go, our attention span. And it's like everyone has ADHD. I mean, for an actual recommendation to be your video needs to be under a minute to catch attention. I mean, that's insane. And so everything is like what I call a junk food culture. We need it fast, we need it quick, we don't have time to think. And that evolves into us losing a lot of our abilities in our brain to think critically. We've developed this hive mindset. How many times have you guys been in a restaurant or somewhere like that, and you're looking at your phone, and then you look up and you see how many people are all looking at their phone? They're all into what it is that's right in front of them instead of the person that's sitting there. I'm guilty of this myself, going out to dinner with my kids or something like that, and we're all just like this. And it's like, now they have it. And I say now because I am pushing 50, but you can even look at how much time you spend on social media or entertainment or work stuff on your phone. And sometimes I am absolutely appalled by the amount of time I spend, and the amount of things that I could be doing and getting, taken care of. And then I start to think that is just the way of the world today. And I just remember a time, and a lot of you do remember a time when, like I said, you had to answer for what was in front of you, and you had nothing but time to think and to read. And so I think the default time, or the default process of our time, was boredom. We did whatever we could to not be bored. There's a video I seen of a guy that talked about that, and it made a really, really big impact on me when I seen it, because it was kind of like, everything we did was meant to occupy the time, and so we didn't have social media, and the phone wasn't like right here. We didn't have abilities to reach the world in ways that we do. You could be looking at your analytics on a video and then totally see somebody in like New Zealand saw it, and that's just crazy. And so the world's become such a smaller place. But like I said, on the negative aspect, you look at things like clickbait and how videos are taken completely out of context. I won't name names, but I will certainly say that I have seen many videos done on people where 30 seconds were played, and then someone had a whole freaking opinion on 30 seconds, and then people just go with it. Nobody has time to look up the actual whole video or anything like that, or go, wait, maybe that does sound a little off, so maybe there's more to the story. Because the thing is that we do engage in confirmation bias. If something is posted that fits our narrative and what we agree with, we don't want to hear nothing else, and that's nuts. I don't know how people can do that, because before I make any type of decision on something, or give any opinion, I at least want to understand both sides, and there may be a side I completely don't agree with, but I at least have a know your enemy mentality. I have books that people shouldn't have, and I read them because I need to understand how people think. And if you understand how people think, sometimes you can get through things. You don't necessarily have to like it. I don't like a lot of stuff that I see in this world today, but I read about it, I comprehend it, so I understand it, and that's how I know how to move. See, that's how you learn how to move. You learn how to move by knowing your enemy. You learn how to move by negotiation, you know, and we don't see any of that anymore. Everybody's just, it has to fit here. It has to fit here. Okay. And that's not the way the natural world works. It's not. It's not. And so when you see all these little things, like people, like even with red lights, I swear I will see people, the light will turn red and you'll see people keep going and going and going and going. Okay. Everybody in each particular car has something going on. I am not here to judge, don't know, or whatever like that. But there's a hive mentality that allowed 3, 4, 5 cars to completely break the fucking rules. And that just blows my mind, I guess. because it's the lack of empathy for anybody else other than ourselves. And so we've become very narcissistic, and very selfish. We don't care about the next person. There are people that you'll look, on your feed, whether it's on IG, Facebook, or TikTok, YouTube. You'll look on these feeds, and then you'll see things like, this person, you know, is ill. This person is going through this. And then what do you see right after that? Laugh emojis. There are people that laugh at other people's demise. And so then what that tells me is that there's two types of people at this point. Okay. Well, there's generally three, but there's two types of people that do this that I want to focus on right now. And so one of those types is people that are so desensitized from everything that they have seen, all the violence that they have seen, to where something like this is funny. And then there are people, and these types of are grouped together. There's a couple of them. There's trolls, and then there's people that have no concept of what distress is. And I want to say that for social media sensibilities. They have no concept. These are people who, want things to happen to people. And I don't care who they are. If you haven't witnessed events like that, you don't have the right, no matter who you are. You do not have the right. So the laughing is disgusting. And it's everywhere. And I feel like if I stop caring about it, then I'm starting to become numb. And I don't want to be numb. I do want to be able to have feelings and emotions and be a human being. And so it's just sad. It's sad to see the things that we allow to divide us. What other people are doing that doesn't really affect us personally is causing us to crash out. And that's crazy. And it's everywhere. It's in the media, especially. And people, you have to understand, their job is to make money. These media places are owned by the same people. There's only like two, three people or companies that own all the media companies in this United States. And so I know that I noticed news shows went from telling you objectively what was going on, and your opinion shows came on Sunday, like Meet the Press, uh, 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes did a very, they did various stories. However, they would cover things too. And so these were shows that particularly served a niche. And so you got to break from that. And then late night will come. So you had Johnny Carson, David Letterman, Arsenio Hall. Even for a minute there, Pat Sajak from Wheel of Fortune had a late night talk show. Shout out if anybody remembers that. If anybody is of my age that is stopped through here or anything like that, shout out to you if you remember that. But yeah, Pat Sajak even had a show, and you just everything had an order, and you had a break for a lot of stuff, And on Saturday nights, you had Saturday Night Live, which, listen, they have some funny skits now, but I remember a time when Saturday Night Live was endlessly funny when they had Eddie Murphy, uh, even when Chris Rock was on there, Adam Sandler, Chris Farley, of course, rest in peace. Um, Tim Meadows, Dana Carvey, they had a heck of a cast throughout their tenure in the early days. And so, you had that to look forward to. And then some of you, I hope, remember Friday night videos. And they would come on like at maybe 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, depending on your time frame. Now, I grew up in Nebraska, so that came on at 12 o'clock at night. So I don't know why they call it Friday night videos, because technically it was Saturday morning. But whatever the case may be, they had that on. And so there was always this routine, and it was always the things that would, everything seemed to kind of cooling you down at the end of the day. And now you look at it, and I don't know what's news anymore. I really don't. Every news channel has an opinion that has to be spoke about the news, rather than allowing the public to form their opinion. Their facts are rooted in opinion, if that makes sense. And then these people, they do these same talking points, and then they go for the jugular every time. It used to be you had to be desperate to go for the jugular on somebody. And now it's just like everybody just attacks one another and say, well, this person did it, so it's okay for me to do it. Okay, so if this person is immoral, you think matching that immorality somehow makes you better? Like, seriously, you match someone's immorality, you match their, you know, grossness. I don't quite know how to explain it. Their debauchery. You think that that's the way you're going to beat them, is if you come down here and then you become the monster you're trying to defeat. Again, back to living long enough to see yourself become the villain. I have done this. I have done this in times in my life where I have seen something where I have been like, I don't know how people are putting up with this. And I didn't see the picture behind it. I didn't see the connections that they had. I didn't see the secret handshake. I wasn't in on it, and nothing got done. And I fought hard to eliminate the threat, and I ended up becoming the threat. And at that point, when that happens to you, you got to pull back. You got to pull back, because you have to self-examine. You've got to at that point, because maybe it is you. You know, and that's the difference between me and a lot of people. I know how to self examine. I know how to admit the things that I have done wrong in life. I know how to say that I messed up. I know how to say that I could have did this better. And there's not a lot of people with that type of virtue. So I am special in that regard. And I take great pride in that. I have come a long way in my life. And so, but I can say, no matter what I've ever went through or ever been or ever did wrong, the one thing I always did was hold myself accountable. Did I learn from my mistakes as easily as I could have? No. May have taken two or three times, but I got it together and understood that I had weaknesses, that I had flaws. And then I had to understand, or think about rather, I don't, I thought about the fact that I didn't like those feelings, you know, and so I changed. And so I guess for me, I'm just looking for more like-minded individuals, as far as, you know, social media with content and things like that, because I wanna start something that's going to uplift people. And I don't even necessarily mean religiously. Yes, I am a Christian, absolutely. But more of what I want to do is put more positivity out there and make sure to not make it corny, because anytime someone tries to be positive or show the best in humanity, it comes out corny. I ain't gonna lie, you know. Um, Hence why it's taking me longer than normal or longer than I thought, rather, to build up a platform. But I've been studying and watching a lot of people doing podcasts, things like that. And this is generally how it started for all of them. And so you got to start somewhere. There's a guy with 20 million followers, and it took him 20 years, or 6 million followers, rather, not 20, but 6 million followers. And it took him 20 years to do it, you know. But in any case, let me get back to the subject. So the division is real thick when it comes to social media, the things that are posted on there, the clickbait that happens on there, the people who verify their websites with fake news. And fake news has been around long before Trump. I hate that it's associated with him, but I remember long before Trump was president, I would do, and I had a talk show back in Nebraska. Not that any of you care, because there's no record of it anymore. I got rid of all the videos. I got really upset with myself one night a few years after I had recorded them, and I got rid of all the videos. But anyway, I did a show, and so I had talked about then a lot of the stuff that's happening now, because I saw things objectively. I looked at history, and that's why I'm such a big history buff, is because if you just look at history and just the way that things start to go, uh, you'll notice that there is a pattern, you know. And so I always was fascinated with that pattern, or I was always fascinated with that pattern. And so um, I would study these things before I would do shows, and I would literally do political stuff. My show was around right when Obama was elected. And so I noticed that there was a division, but I don't think that it started there. I think the real division started with the propaganda pieces that were being put out there when social media started to blow up. Like, the more that it started to spread, both sides were able to spread, or many sides even were able to spread what they wanted. And it's been proven that some of these big movements with these hashtags were started by like 6 to 11 people, you know, and they force everyone to take a side. And that blows my mind, how everyone takes a side. They're quick, especially if it agrees with what they said. Like, this is a real good example, especially of how judgmental people can be. So I ended up crossing paths with an old friend that I knew many, many, many years ago. And so I had mentioned, hey, how's it going? Whatever, like that. What's new? I was like, just living on the Gulf Coast now, loving life, married and everything. And they're like, well, what part of the coast? And I said, yeah, South Alabama. And they went completely into this far left rant about Alabama and living here. And it was like, this person has never even been here. And so then I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, well, actually, and to be honest, I have been more successful here than I was back home in Nebraska. And as far as racism, I was called the N word, I don't know how much in Nebraska. And I was born and raised there. And I've been here 3 years, and I have had no issues with anyone. Every place has its downsides. You know what I mean? And so every place has places that Black people aren't welcome. Nebraska has them too. There's like 10, 12 places in Nebraska. And that's what always bothers me, is that everybody judges stuff and you haven't been there, you don't know it. I've had to deal with a lot of people like that. They immediately run off at the mouth and they don't even know the other side of something. Don't know, they don't have a relationship to give you any advice on one, but somehow they always got something to say about what you should do. Um, they might live with somebody or live in an apartment, and then you have a house, and somehow they know how to tell you how to handle business. And so knowledge isn't necessarily represented by what you have, but if you're going to give advice, you got to kind of know your place. And so there's always people giving their opinions and they don't have the full story, and that's become like an epidemic. That's up there with like COVID, where people are just ready to go right off at the mouth. And so by the end of this whole exchange with this person, I ended up feeling like this is why we don't talk anymore. I forgot how judgmental you were. Not everything works for everybody, and I get it, and everybody's reality. And I talked about this in my last video. Um, Everybody's reality is subjective. It really is. And I'm not talking about the like 3D and all that quantum stuff. I'm talking about day to day life. Everybody's reality is different. That's why there's so many misunderstandings that happen, because people process things. And then not only does that happen face to face, but it even happens when you text someone. Have you ever texted somebody and then like said something and you thought it was funny, but you didn't think you had to say LOL to make it funny? And then they go completely off the rails and you're like, wait, I'm just joking. And then they'll say something like this. It didn't sound like you were joking. How do you know what it sounded like if I texted it to you? Doesn't make any sense. But that's how emotional we get. That like, and what I also think is that's a big part. When people do that, that's also a big part of that inner voice. See, I learned that a lot of us have an many of us rather have an inner voice. Like if you read a book, do you hear a voice? And if you do, what does that voice sound like? Does it sound like you? Does it sound like something else? um we have an internal monologue, basically. And so I always thought everybody had that. I thought everyone had that. Turns out there are people who don't. And so those are the people that when they read something, the only thing they have to go off of is previous context. And so they don't see the nuance, they don't catch it in the texting. And you do. And so then you have to explain it. And then once you explain it, they finally get it. So I would implore people not to get mad if someone doesn't fully understand your text, because they may not have an internal monologue. You know, I was in a excuse me, a conversation thread the other day with somebody and with some people, and we were all talking about this joke, and the joke was funny, and so uh, it kind of was a racial joke, but it was actually kind of funny too, because we were all kind of joking and playing off of each other's stereotypes, adult stuff. We can laugh and have a good time and not take anything personal. And so one of the comments was that it was about black people going to movies and talking through the whole movie. And I said, yeah, that's why I go to movies alone during the day. So, and if you didn't get the joke, sorry, but there are those who do. And so a lot of people got that joke. And so someone posted, and I swear it was funny because in her profile picture, she had the face of like George Patton. It was crazy. And she goes, it is true. You can't take a joke. And I was like, wait, you obviously have missed the whole thread. Like, I literally commented, I need you to go back and look at where it started and then read it all the way down. We're all joking, we're all having a good time. So they no longer were on the feed after that. And it's just like crazy that even if a misunderstanding like that can occur, imagine the misunderstandings that occur that end with unfortunate situations. Not quite understanding what somebody said, taking it the wrong way. People being too far into their emotions. People who make comments, social media, and then people react to them. You hear about this all the time where, you know, even in hip hop, basically, almost especially there, beefs will be started over a tweet or, a comment on the stream or, and then it'll end in someone, doing something stupid. And so, what do we do about that? Because I mean, this stuff is here to stay. I mean, social media, clickbait, propaganda, AI, it's all here. What do you do? And this division is forced. It's just going to keep happening. You know, if you spend time actually talking to people, like really talking to people, having a conversation, you learn that you have more in common than that you don't. You have more in common with people than you think. You know, but nobody has time. Nobody has time for it anymore. Nobody has time to be polite anymore. And it has been proven that the things you see on social media do affect anything you read, and anything with the media in general does affect your thought process. So if you're exposed to more negative things, if you're exposed to, you know, hate, you tend to either dive into it or become numb to it, you know. And there's a small few who know how to put those things away and understand the bigger picture. And I gotta be honest, I'm one of those small few because I saw so much hate growing up in my life and went through so much in my own childhood, um, that if I wasn't moving by exceptional means, I wouldn't be here today, you know. So I know it's possible, no matter how hard it may be. I know that whatever it is that I need to do comes from within, and it's there. There's so many ways I could have went, you know, and I've lived a bunch of lifetimes. And so, and when I say lifetimes, I don't mean like past lives. I mean, I've reinvented myself a lot in life, you know. Someone called me very mercurial. And so, for a long time, I was definitely that. Um, but I guess all that and all my experiences is what make me see the world the way it is. Because I've seen so many different aspects of it, especially, my generation that, like I said, when none of this existed, no social media, no, and then now we're thrown into this world where this stuff is all over the place. And then it's like, wow, such a change. And so I think that's why maybe my generation has the ability to pull back and see the panoramic view for what it is that's happening in the world today. Um, bottom line, I think that, you know, civilization has reached its peak. Um, and it happens. It's happened throughout history. And, I was thinking of something, and it's like you look at history and you look at different empires and what took them down. The one thing they all have in common is that every single empire and civilization thought they were the exception. Every single one. No matter how it happened, they thought they were the exception. No matter how long it happened, they thought they were the exception. Oh, it can't happen to us. It can. It always does. History has a pattern. And a lot of times, and I brought this up in the other episode, is a lot of times people, I wonder if the energy we put out there continues us along this pattern, or is it just predestined for civilizations to rise and fall? You know, because they always all start out really great. They start out on some sort of common ground, and then they all end with implosion, betrayal. Rarely are empires or civilizations taken down from outside. It always happens within. And I remember saying 20 years ago to somebody that there will never be a country that will conquer us ever. You People have to understand there's not a country on the face of the earth that can defeat the United States in combat. I'm not talking about how long a conflict takes or whatever. Um, Whatever you're thinking, the country plays with kid gloves because they want to try to have the appearance of following the law. But if they truly wanted to take care of things, we have the ability to do it. Much less, let's say someone were to invade the United States. You're dealing with a population of over 300 million people. And then look at the ratio of those who own protection, if that makes sense. And especially as nationalistic as we are, for everybody that talks about they don't, you know, especially people that are from here, that just blows my mind. Like when people talk about America and you're from America, and then now it's become associated with like if you're an American and proud of who you are, then you're automatically a party affiliated, and that doesn't that's so stupid that's become what that meant. And then you'll hear black people talking about go back to Africa. Let me make this clear. And I'm probably going to get called all sorts of names by doing this, but um, first and foremost, I am proud of my people and I am proud of our accomplishments, and I think that we all have the ability to work together to build something really awesome. But I would never, ever consider going back to Africa to live uh, for many reasons. We're far removed generationally. Ancestrally, yes, I would love to visit and things like that. But as far as like leaving the United States over the problems that are going on, you got to look at it like this. African Americans come from ancestors, whether we were slaves or business owners, especially since we come from slave ancestry. We had a lot to do with the infrastructure and the hard labor that happened in this country. And I feel like if I were to leave, I would be sacrificing what my ancestors have sacrificed if I ran from a place where they lost their lives and didn't show that, we've risen above that and we are the peak and pinnacle of Black excellence today and are able to coexist and build and recognize the great things about us, and how we can bring out the best in everybody. I mean, our culture is all over the world, you know, and so uh, it's just I can never imagine leaving, you know, and because they died for this, you know, they lost, they gave up so much, and so I could never imagine that, and so. Um, Also, people really don't get how tough it is to live in another country. I've talked to a lot of people who thought that there were greener pastures somewhere else, and boy, have they gone through it. I mean, really, and you don't know how good you got it. I mean, you got celebrities that are trying to come back and then to leave a country because of a president. You're not really loyal to the cause if you leave people, because these people are leaving the country and then spouting rules and laws. Oh, who is this? People are leaving the country and then spouting rules and laws that they shouldn't. You know, somebody completely distracted me, so I apologize about that. But we go to these other countries, or they go to these other countries rather. They go to these other countries, and then they will tell Americans, their fans, you know, fight the good fight. You know, uh, go to the polls and do this, and go to the polls and do that. And they live in Ireland or they live in Italy. They left, but they're directing traffic. You know, and that's crazy to me. I don't care what side you're on, right wing, left wing, same freaking bird. Like, if you can't see the hypocrisy in that type of thought, why would you listen to these people? And then on top of that, whatever happened to negotiation? Whatever happened to compromise? Whatever happened to, okay, maybe we don't like this person, but, you know, let's try to understand their thought process. Let's get together. Let's have a discussion. Nobody wants to talk about anything anymore. And that's on both sides. It's not just one side. And I hate saying that both sides thing because it's just people in general. Screw sides, because honestly, they're all on the same side and we're down here going through it just so they can keep getting paid. And the sooner people understand that, the more you'll get that it's all a big game. It's all a game. They have the same donors. They all make money together. They've known each other for years. It's like if you talk to someone who's been incarcerated, and they'll tell you, like, when you go in front of a judge and there's a judgment to be made, and you got your attorney there, you got the prosecutor, you got all these people there. Those people work together, so they're like friends. So they've been to lunch and probably discussed your case. They probably already know what they're going to do to you before you even get up there. And there's so many people that get up there and they don't think like that. You think this is all by chance? No, your fate is already decided in many, many cases when you walk into a courtroom. It's all a game. It's all a game. They have all of us fooled, bamboozled, hoodwinked. Y'all know where that comes from. Y'all know that movie, hopefully, right? You know, it's Malcolm X with Denzel Washington. Great movie. Um, but yeah, we we're all falling for it. And if we don't find some sort of way to collectively get our minds together and understand what the real problems are and who the real people are that are causing these problems, we're going to live out our own prophecies. And it's sad to see because there's so many people like me. There's so many of y'all out there that know exactly what I'm talking about. Everybody's so quick to take a side and label themselves. Always, I'm this, I'm that. They're always a ist, you know. They're ist. I'm an ist. And they're quick to do it too. They're an ist or an an. It's or a ite. It's always something, you know. Even in music. Back in the day, you were a Prince fan, Michael Jackson fan. You know, nowadays you're a Swiftie or Beehive. labels, 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 freaking labels. People are good about that. Everybody's got to belong to something. They got to belong to a group. They have to, you know, and then they get in these groups and then all they do is spin their thoughts in these same groups and then you can't reach them when they get that way. So they detected something. Wait, let's see. I think my live has been on for so long. Okay. All right. We good. But everybody goes in groups. And people don't get when you do groups, it's hard for y'all to meet or have common ground and beefs and battles develop. Quit people. You gotta quit being so quick and to put yourself in a category because what you're doing is you actually limit yourself. You limit your mind frame because if you put yourself in a group that's going to constantly support everything you say, how are you ever going to grow if you're never being challenged? I never got that. Everybody just wants it handed to them. They don't want to work for nothing. They don't want to earn it. It's too much. You can't grow as a person if you restrict yourself. You have to get to an age where you bring it back in and restrict yourself. Like me, I have lived it all, done it all thoroughly. And I'm at that point in my life now where it's like, it's time to ride off into the sunset. You know, my kids are grown. You know, I'm married, you know, loving life. Everything is good. I mean, or financial issues. Who ain't having financial issues these days? You know, but I'm not going to feel extra messed up about something everyone else is going through. I'm not going to put myself through that. I'm just not gonna, you know. And so we got to get out of these groups and labels. You are who you are. It's just you. Because when you get yourself in groups, then you feel like you deserve things other people don't deserve. It's so like that comes from kindergarten, you know. But we're quick to do it. We're quick to tribal up, you know. People are afraid to stand on their own anymore. And that's why there's people like me. I'm a person that stands on his own. And this is why nobody's watching. I'm not talking about what everyone else is talking about. I'm not talking about, you know, superficial stuff. I'm talking about the stuff that's forcing you to think. And that's scary for some of y'all. It is scary for someone to tell you, look inside yourself. Go look at any of my videos, anything. I always talk about self examination. And those are the videos that always get the least amount of views. That's interesting. Or the least amount of reactions or comments or whatever. Because it's in the title and some of them, self examination. No, nobody wants to do that. And I get it. Who wants to look in the mirror and see the ugly truth? And I don't mean physically. Who wants to see what they really are inside? Nobody wants to face that. So not only are we divided as a nation because of superficial things and things that people think, and because someone thinks differently than I do, then they don't deserve this and they don't deserve that, and bad things should happen, and ha 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 when it happens to this person, but oh no when it happens to that person, and it's all this childishness, man, and life is just going to keep going on. So if you keep wasting your energy, you're not going to enjoy anything while you're here. And we're only here for a short time. Hook or crook, we're only here for a short time. And too many of y'all are wasting y'all time on things that A, have nothing to do with you, B, are inconsequential at the end of the day, and C, if you just toughen up, everything will be fine. You'll get through it. And D, all things happen for a reason. Under heaven, all things happen for a reason. Those are four things that people need to get together and get in their head. And that's what's gotten me through. And I know that because that's what got me through my childhood. That's what got me through anything bad that happened to me. And I had some doozies. I've had some things happen to me, and I have gotten through them having that mindset of those four things. The sum of who you are is not right now. If you're going through something bad, if you're dealing with something, that's this right here. Don't be a fatalist. That's not your finality. You can grow from that. You can expand. Things are going to suck sometimes. But if you're too quick to give up, you never know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I always tell myself that I got to see what happens tomorrow. So, but not everybody can be like me. Not everybody can have my mindset. So, regardless of whether I'm successful in this content creator realm or whatever, I know my stuff is here for posterity, for my kids to see, for people to look at, and even for the few people that have watched it and follow me. I appreciate it because as long as I reach somebody. But ultimately, I do feel like if I did more salacious content, maybe talked a little more crap about people, you know, maybe created some ops, I probably would get it, but I'm just not that type of person. And I think there's too much of that in the world. It's like, sometimes I think people need a break from that type of stuff. And so that's why I feel like my content is good. But when we're talking about, and we're going to go back to this, and then I'm probably going to wrap this up soon, but when we're talking about, civilizations at the end, like I said, they all have a pattern. And you don't know you're in the pattern until you're already in it. And then there are those people who see ahead, and it's just like I've always kind of looked at myself as a seer or a watcher. You know, I don't speak a lot on this level, and that's why any of you that have stuck around for this or even watched it, thank you for hanging out. But um, eventually things are going to get better, but we're going to go through a lot. Um, it's just par for the course. History always proves that. So, shout out to everybody who watched. Please like, share, and subscribe. You may like my content. And I hope you do give it a try. Um, this is my first YouTube live, so I appreciate anyone who jumped in or whatever like that. I don't have my reading glasses on, so I can't really see who's done what. So if there's anybody that's jumped on or anybody that said anything, thank you. I appreciate you watching, especially some of you in some other social media lands. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you like my content. Again, like, share, and subscribe. This is Samuel Hunter. I appreciate all of you. Be blessed, stay strong, and stay true to yourselves. Peace out.